Hi, it's Dave Jewell from Free Run Speed. By the time you see this, I will have run the Grand Canyon in Arizona. I'm gonna do the rim to rim to rim with a buddy and another group of people. So I'm looking forward to it. If you followed along, I was planning on doing some kind of ultra this fall, but the way things have gone, everything's been canceled, and I kind of lost motivation to train to race an ultra. A friend of mine asked me to join his group in the Grand Canyon, and I thought, why not? I didn't train for it. I didn't do anything except for what I normally do, and I'm gonna go wing it. I look at it as an adventure, as a challenge, something that I'm confident that I can do, but it's gonna hurt a lot, and I look forward to it. So I'll try to report back at some point next week. Until then, we're gonna talk about the shoes of 1985 to 90-ish that inspired me and inspired a whole bunch of other runners. But before I get there, my shoe of choice in the Grand Canyon is going to be the Speedgoat 4 from Hoka One One. I chose this over the Evo Speedgoat simply because it's more comfortable and it's going to be just a better ride for the 44 miles and 11,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. You can't talk about the 80s or the 90s or even the 2000s without talking about Asics. And there were two shoes in the late 80s that I think really set the tone. The first is the Eporus. First, the shoe was it was ugly. It was a mustard yellow ugly. But I'll bet with a little bit of change to maybe midsole foam and maybe a little change to the upper material, and that shoe would be valid today. It was that good. And because of the color and style of the shoe, it stood out, and you could see so many people running in it. It was wild. If you look through the historical part, the Eporus was the precursor to the GT series that really took off in the mid to late 90s. And it was just a well-balanced, easy shoe to run in. The other shoe that Asics introduced at that time was the Gellite. And it was just a beautiful execution of lightweight, go fast running. It just screamed, put me on and let's go for a run. My favorite through the years was the Gellite 3 that had the split tongue. What an innovation that you didn't have a regular tongue and it wasn't a sleeve, it was a split in the tongue where the eye row just opened up. You slipped your foot in and then you laced it up. I had a racing flat from Asics that I used a lot during that time that had the split tongue. It was so easy to go barefoot in. It was just a great innovation at the time. I'm surprised that nobody has tried to actually improve on that innovation, because I think it would still be valid today. Nike had two shoes that kind of set the tone for the brand for years. In fact, one of them is still being made today. It took a little hiatus, but it's still being made today, and that's the Pegasus. I put so many miles in the Pegasus, it's crazy. That shoe was so durable and just a simple construction, great shoe to run in. And there's a reason why it's the #1 selling shoe of all time. Not that particular version or anything, but the Pegasus overall. The second Nike is the Air Max. And when that was first introduced, you just had to go try it on. And it was just a great ride. I used it for all my long runs on the road, and it just felt great. I know I ran through a couple of years of the Air Max. In fact, it will show up in a story that I'm going to tell you later. You can't talk about the 80s without talking about the New Balance 990. Jim Davis went to the product team and said, I want you to make the ultimate running shoe. Put everything into it to make it the best ultimate running shoe on the market. New Balance came out with the 990 and priced it at $100. That was absolutely crazy at the time. It was ridiculous that a running shoe would cost $100. Yet people bought it and still buy it today. It's not $100 anymore, but the 990 came out and really showed the market. If you really went after just super high quality, people would react. Runners would react. Adidas had a shoe called the Organ. That was a simple, lightweight trainer, but they were using a very unique midsole construction, and they were using it on most of their shoes. They had a webbing that wrapped around the midsole that kept that midsole intact, so it wouldn't bottom out. The midsole, as it compressed, would not bottom out because the webbing was holding it together. It was really cool, and that people loved that shoe and loved the marathon trainer and other shoes from Adidas at the same time. Saucony came out with a shoe called the Azura ST. And as soon as it came out, I had to go buy it and try it. In fact, as luck would go, I qualified for the Ironman World Championships in Kona the same year the Azura came out, and I wore that shoe for the race. A few years later, I got invited to a long run with a contender for victory in Kona and a couple other guys, and we show up for the run, and he has a current version of the Azura on, and we start running. Probably 45 minutes into a 2-hour run, and he starts developing a blister. We can't have that with a guy that potentially could win the race. So we stopped and thought about what to do. I said, why don't you take my shoes, which happen to be the Air Max, why don't you take my shoes and I'll run in yours. The problem was my shoes were a full size larger than his, which wasn't a problem for him. In fact, it would be good for him. So he put on that Air Max, and then I took my socks off and put his shoe that was way too small for me, and we ran the rest of the way. I got the blister, he didn't, but yet that's okay because he went on to win the Ironman World Championships a few weeks later. The last shoe that came out in the 80s that I think is worth talking about, the Chariot from Brooks. Now remember, back in 1981, Brooks filed for bankruptcy because of mismanagement. 1982, the Chariot comes out. By the time I got to Roadrunner Sports, so I had worked on the sales floor at a local retailer, worked my way up into the buying office, and then eventually moved over to Roadrunner Sports. We had the Chariot, and Brooks made it specifically for us. As long as we kept up with the minimums, they were going to make it for us. And that was actually good for Brooks because they were struggling. It was very difficult to find a Brooks shoe that people really liked other than the Regent, which became the Beast. But we had the Chariot, and we kept that Chariot. I know we kept it for at least 12 more years. So the person that was wearing it in the 80s continued to buy that Chariot all the way through the 90s because of what we did at Roadrunner. It was crazy to think that it was ugly. By the time 1994 came along, the shoe looked old. But it didn't matter. It worked so well for a group of runners that they just kept buying it. They didn't have to stock up. They didn't have to go chase shoes, go try on different shoes. They just bought the Chariot over and over and over and over again. It was one of the more amazing things in my running shoe career that we kept that shoe going for as long as we did. Anyway, we'll get into more modern day running shoes next time because soon the Kayano and the GT 2000 will come out and the Supernova. Get into a little bit more modern day because things are about to change and really the market is about to change. The next running boom is upon us. Thanks a lot for watching. Again, when you're out there running, wave to the runner on the other side of the street. Smile at them. Make their day. We need a lot more of that right now. With COVID and the crazy election going on in the United States, just make someone's day by acknowledging that they're out there running too. Thanks a lot for watching. Talk to you next week.